Welcome to my corner of the internet. I am Sheila. Today, I want to share one of my greatest loves with you, my love of books. I've been an avid reader for as long as I can remember, and though my preferences leaned more towards fiction, I was also fascinated by the natural world, science, people, and history. Being raised in a Christian background with both my parents in academia, our house was typically filled with books. Until today, books are part of what make a home beautiful to me. I hardly ever limit books to the bookshelf. They're scattered throughout the home. Majority of the books I read while younger were books in the library, in the school library, and other libraries I had access to, like the one where my father was a lecturer. In our household, a lot of religious books were lining the shelves, and I read the story-based ones indiscriminately. One day though, I brought a Harry Potter book home, and it was made unequivocally clear that no books on witchcraft would be tolerated in our home. I've still not caught up with the Harry Potter books, and I hardly watched the movies, but I'm really curious to get into this cult favorite. I read in phases, and I went through a John Grisham phase. There was a period where I mostly read only John Grisham books. Back then, we read what we could find. The selection was limited to what was rotating around the readers' circles and who could afford to buy books. You couldn't be too choosy. And though I went to an all-girl boarding school and some of the most popular books, or majority of the popular books, were actually romance novels, that was never really my cup of tea. I didn't mind the sex scenes though. It was a curious teenage period. Murder mysteries and legal dramas were my clear favorites. Over the years, I had the resources to pick my own selection of books. That was the golden era, right after high school, where movement was less limited and streets in the CBD were lined with second-hand book vendors. You could find a book for as cheap as 50 shillings. That was a thrilling time for readers like me. I now had access to obscure titles by little-known writers from across the pond. Asia, the Arab world, and even the Caribbean islands. It was my little ticket to world travel, something I fantasized about from the moment I picked up a book. Until today, even though I'm sometimes influenced to check out newly acclaimed writers from around the world, there's a special pleasure I get from reading books by writers who haven't got on the radar of the New York Times bestseller list or been recommended by Oprah's book club. In fact, one of my favorite books to date is by Jamaican author Velma Pollard. The only reason I came across this gem was because it was an elective during my literature classes in high school. I've read it more than 5 times so far. For now, I'd like to share some of the books I've read this year and what's on my current reading list. I now see reading more like a marathon than a sprint. In my younger years, specifically my teenage years, I could read a 500-pager in 2 days, sometimes even 1 day, depending on how much time I had with a book. But now I take my time through the pages to savor every word and to take it all in. Like when I picked up Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, I just didn't want it to end. So I read the book in chapters, and sometimes it was difficult to not go to the next chapter. And even then, I would sometimes reread a chapter. Some of the chapters that I found really funny or more interesting, I read more than once, I'll admit. Trevor Noah, if in some alternate universe you come across this video, please write more books. I'm sure lots of us would be thrilled to read more from you. Stellar comedic books are not easy to come by. So what have I been reading? A few fictional books, a lot of more factual ones, and some that I guess you could call self-help. Atomic Habits. Everyone and their cousin has probably heard of or picked this book. It's certainly worth a read, and if you're on the journey of getting your life and systems together, a lot of us need a little extra push in the direction of personal discipline and self-development. There's no shame in that. I like how his writing style is easygoing and not dense but practical, with actual action points to get you to not only feel motivated but actually do the work it takes to change your habits, lifestyle, and in a sense who you are, to become a better version of yourself. Another book I picked in the self-development category this year was 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. It's fascinating to dive into and learn about the human psyche. What motivates us, and understanding this can help you act from a place of self-awareness. Self-awareness goes a long way. A lot of our thoughts and actions are strongly influenced by the lens with which we see the world and the one with which we see ourselves. Having a clear lens is something I'd choose over a cloudy one any day, and I'm sure you would too. In the fictional world, I've thoroughly enjoyed especially two books. Elif Shafak's 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange World, and more recently, Memoirs of a Geisha. Elif Shafak has been on my radar for a while now. I had read an article about this particular book, and the premise of it piqued my interest. The odd timeline that makes up part of its title is, according to research, how long it takes for us to fully lose awareness or consciousness when declared dead. To weave a tale from this interesting fact is odd in the most beautiful way. I was sold and wanted to interact with a genius mind that would dare to write such a book. I picked up Memoirs of a Geisha from Half Priced Books, a local bookstore that a friend highly recommended. Second-hand, half-priced books are a guilty pleasure. Who doesn't like a bargain? It was a really pleasant read, and I gouged it down greedily, finishing it in record time for my current speeds. I really enjoy books that have a historical and cultural theme. It's a fun way to be a sort of voyeur into cultures and lifestyles that are different from your own. Speaking of bargains, Textbook Center tends to have regular sales, and I picked up an unlikely biography in the 600 shilling pile, Mad Girl's Love Song, a retelling of Sylvia Plath's life story. I hadn't heard of her before, but the idea of reading about the inner life of an acclaimed poet was attractive enough. Poets are, after all, a fascinating lot. Word artists, sometimes philosophers. People who spend a lot of time ruminating are my kind of people. A peek into their inner life would surely be a treat. So far, I'm enjoying the process of learning about this talent and her motivations. Reading her poetry after this should make for an interesting adventure. Some books I've picked along the way have been something of a slow burn, like Paulo Coelho's Hippie, which I put away but might go back to. And Tomorrow I'll Be 20 by Alain Mabankou. This one I bought right after attending a documentary screening of a film that he had done about being black in France. It was a really interesting film, and we had a very enlightening discussion right after. And I thought, yeah, maybe I want to read a little bit more, or just take in a little bit more of the work that this man has done. I thoroughly enjoyed the insights explored in this documentary and the conversations that followed. It might be more enjoyable to read him in his native French, or maybe this is one of those books that just read slowly and warm up to along the way. It's one of the things I've come to embrace, that the measure of a book is not in how long it takes for you to read it. Just like people, authors should be experienced differently. Some jump right out of the page, others lure you in slowly, and yet others dig into the depths of your soul or pull at your heartstrings. While some take a bit of time and patience to engage with, but the reward is always a new insight, a better understanding of yourself and others, or a peek into a world far removed from your own. No matter their style and pace, it's always an adventure. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.